Hey guys, welcome to Through the Bible, verse by verse, a plain and simple study of the entire Bible, book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse. Okay, we are in 2 Samuel chapter 20. David is having a tumultuous time. He has just gotten victory over his own son's coup attempt, which ended in Absalom's death. And we don't know why, but David was really broken up over this. You can look at this from two sides. Absalom was never, David was never really in Absalom's life, which kind of led to how his attitude fostered. He was pampered, spoiled as a royalty. So his revolt, probably was surprising to David, but there was some bad blood. Remember, he raped his daughter, Tamar. I'm sorry, I'm butchered that. No, he didn't rape. He killed Ammon, his other son, who raped his daughter, Tamar. So, but anyway, he's over that. He's gotten the victory over that. Joab, and this is something that is interesting. Joab, we're going to see more about Joab. Now remember, Joab is his nephew, his sister's son. Seem like a lot of the people that's close in David's orbit or relatives. Again, we're going to see that. So one of the things that David tried to do or take advantage of was to put Joab out. So, and remember, Joab, being David's nephew, he actually conquered Jerusalem. In other words, there were two things. Remember when Abishai, who is Joab's brother, David's nephew, he said to David, to kill a person who was bad-mouthing David when he was on the run. And David had a very interesting response to Abishai. And Abishai is kind of loyal to David. However, he's also loyal to Joab, his brother. We're going to see this later. And so, but David's response, remember, was, do we agree on anything, you sons of Zerai? Right? His sister. And that kind of is telling in that, David, the three sons, one of them is dead. Remember, his brother was killed years ago when David took the throne. But the other two sons pretty much did whatever they want. Joab, remember, he doesn't have political aspirations as king. He never wanted to be king. But he is military commander, and we're going to see that. And David could not do anything about that. And back when he was ascending to the throne, he said if anyone takes Jerusalem, they would be commander of the military. Well, Joab did that, despite the fact that David didn't really want Joab, because while Joab is a superb warrior, he's caused David a lot of trouble politically. For example, he killed Abner because he killed his brother. Even though David was trying to broker peace to try to heal the nation, as Saul was killed, and then David took the throne. The house of Saul still was in rebellion. Abner, Saul's uncle, was trying to manipulate the situation, but David was trying to heal the nation. He was trying to broker this. He was trying to heal this, trying to bring the nation back together from the house of Saul to the house of David. And here comes Joab killing Abner, for his own personal greedy reasons. So, Joab, so David just couldn't get rid of Joab, and so when Absalom revolted, David attempts to replace Joab, put him out of office, and he then appoints Amasa, his nephew again, but from another baby mama, and puts him in Joab's place. Well, we're going to see how that turns out. So here we go. Chapter 20. Now, a wicked man, a Benjamite named Sheba, son of Bertri, happened to be there, and he blew a ram's horn and shouted, "We have no portion in David, no inheritance in Jesse's son, each man to his tent, Israel." Now, you see the remnants. Just kind of file this in your head, because we're going to come back to this when we get into Solomon's reign. Actually, after Solomon's reign. But there always seemed to have been the seeds of the kingdom that split. So you had Judah, but then you had the other 10 kingdoms, mostly the northern kingdoms, that was considered Israel. Okay. So here you see the risk, this danger here of, again, another civil war. Verse 2. So all of the men of Israel deserted David and followed Sheba, son of Bertri. But the men of Judah from the Jordan all the way to Jerusalem remained loyal to their king. And when David came to his palace in Jerusalem, now remember, he's fresh off of squashing the rebellion of Absalom. So verse 3, and when David came to his place in Jerusalem, he took the 10 concubines he had left to take care of in the palace, and took them under, and placed them under guard. He provided for them, but he was not intimate with them. And they were confined until the day of their death, living as widows. Now, it's kind of interesting. First of all, you look at this from the very start. This is a messed up situation. David had 10 concubines. So what this means was David had 10 legal side pieces, right? These were, the concubines served to as pleasure. They were sex objects. They were specifically for the king, sex objects, okay? The wives were for posterity. So Bathsheba, Abigail, and his other wives, they were for the lineage. They were the legal wives. But the concubines, that's where David played. And of course, if you remember, Absalom, in front of the whole nation, slept with all 10 of these concubines. So what you kind of see here is this probably was two things. One, David's anger, right? And then two, he had to, in a sense, show this symbol of his, that he could not he could not tolerate this. He doesn't execute them. Now, one can go back and forth and ask, were they wrong? The question would be, what could they have done? At any rate, David now isolates them. He doesn't sleep with them again. And I want you to keep this in mind again after we go through the kingdom of, actually coming up shortly. I'm take that back. Coming up shortly. You're going to see how this is going to the maneuvering of this, the strategy. We're going to see how Solomon's brother would try to, and this is going to be some wisdom that Solomon's going to use right here. Well, we'll talk about that later. But so David isolates them. They live as widows. They never knew any men anymore. They lived in the isolated place. They were taken care of. However, they couldn't marry. As I said, they lived as widows. All right. Verse 4. The king said to Amasa, summon the men of Judah to me within 3 days, and be here yourself. Now, remember, Amasa was put in as commander of the military in Joab's place. Amasa is Joab's half brother. He is David's nephew by another sister. Okay, verse 5. I think I'm not sure I correct that. I think I said earlier Amasa was. If I said he was David's son by another baby mama, I misspoke on that. He is David's nephew by another sister. Okay, all right. So, verse 5. Amasa went to summon Judah, but he took longer than the time allotted him. So David said to Abishai, Sheba son of Birchi would do more harm to us than Absalom. Take your Lord's soldiers and pursue them, or he will find fortified cities to elude us. Now, Amasa messes up, right? David wanted to crush this rebellion swiftly. Amasa, for whatever reason, he messes up. But also, we're not through with him yet, so stay tuned. But notice David turns to Abishai instead of Joab. Now watch what happens. He says to Abishai, take control. But look at verse 7. So, excuse me, Joab's men, the Cherethites, the Pelethites, and all the warriors marched out under Abishai's command. They left Jerusalem to pursue Sheba, son of Birchi. They were at the great stone in Gibeon when Amasa joined them. So here's the thing now. So now Amasa shows up. Joab was wearing his uniform over it, with his belt around his waist, with the sword in his sheath. And as he approached, the sword fell out. Joab asked Amasa, are you well, my brother? That's kind of interesting because they were, remember, related. They were first cousins. They're first cousins. Verse 10. Let me go back to verse 9 again. Joab asked him, are you well, my brother? Then with his right hand, Joab grabbed Amasa by the beard to kiss him. Amasa was not on guard against the sword in Joab's hand, and Joab stabbed him in the stomach with it and spilled his intestines out on the ground. Joab did not stab him again, for Amasa was dead. Now, Joab and his brother Amasa pursued Sheba, son of Birchi. Now, very gruesome sight here, right? So here, the Bible tells some very gruesome stories. Here you have, again, this is family, by the way, but Joab was more about power. And you're going to see that now Joab regains his power by executing despite the fact that David the king, right? David the king appointed him, took Joab out of his office and put Amasa in there. So this should have been a very criminal act, that he's killing one of the king's officials. Now it should have been. David doesn't do anything here. And it kind of shows you sometimes political power, how political power works. All right. By the way, Joab had a lot of people on his side. That's one of the reasons why David had to be careful here. He had a lot of people on his side, and could have caused another coup. All right. Verse 11. One of Joab's young men had stood over Amasa, saying, whoever favors Joab and whoever is for David, follow Joab. Now watch this now. This is really treason. They're violating David's orders, right? David's appointment. But this is where politics becomes very crude, very shrewd here. As I said, Joab now has taken back his position. So even if you didn't like Amasa, Abishai was still appointed by David. But Joab now takes his position. Why? The people were following him. Now, it also should take notice that David didn't ask counsel of the Lord. In other words, Lord, what should we do about Joab? Joab is a mess. What should we do about Joab? David doesn't ask. So the idea is that now this thing is running its course. That Joab, even though he's a fantastic military leader, right? Fantastic. But because he has the men behind him, if David was to try to make a move against him, he risks having a worse rebellion than Absalom and Sheba. And if you notice, what's kind of funny about this is that Joab and the men are like, we're still following David, but Joab just got to be military leader. Verse 12. Now Amasa was writhing in his blood in the middle of the highway, and the man had seen that all the people stopped, so he moved Amasa from the highway to the field and threw a garment over him because he realized that all those who encountered Amasa were stopping. When he was removed from the highway, all the men passed by and followed Joab to pursue Sheba, son of Berjab. So now Joab is taking control of the military again. Verse 14. Sheba passed through all the tribes of Israel to Abel of Bethmaachah. All the Berites came together and followed him. Joab's troops came and besieged Sheba and Abel of Bethmaachah. They built an assault ramp against the outer wall of the city. And while all the troops with Joab were battering the wall to make it collapse, a wise woman called out from the city, Listen, please tell Joab to come here and let me speak with him. And when he came near her, the woman asked, Are you Joab? I am, he replied. Listen to the words of your servant, she said to him. He answered, I am listening. She said, In the past, they used to say, seek counsel in Abel. And that's how they settled disputes. I'm a peaceful person, one of the faithful in Israel, but you're trying to destroy the city that is like a mother in Israel. Why would you devour the Lord's inheritance? Joab protested, Never. I do not want to destroy it. That is not my intentions. There is a man named Sheba, the son of Berchi, from the hill country of Ephraim, who has rebelled against King David. Deliver this one man, and I will withdraw from the city. Kind of interesting again. Notice Joab, he's loyal to David. Just as long as David understands, he commands the military. The woman replied to Joab, All right, his head would be thrown over the wall to you. The woman went to all the people with her wise counsel. They cut off the head of Sheba, son of Berchi, and threw it to Joab. So he blew the ram's horn, and they dispersed from the city, each to his own tent. And Joab returned to the king in Jerusalem. Now get this. Joab commanded the whole army of Israel. So right here, Joab wasn't handling any kind of regime changes, military command changes. As I said, he was faithful to David in this respect. He was faithful to Israel. He was for Israel. He defended Israel. But he was going to run that army. Verse 23. Joab commanded the whole army of Israel. Benaiah, son of Joadah, was over the Cherethites and the Pelethites. And then Anoram was in charge of forced labor. Jehoshaphat, son of Ahilud, was court historian. Shiva was court secretary. Zodak and Abiathar and Abithar, I think anyway, were priests. In addition, Ira and Jared was David's priest. So you see this again. We're kind of winding down, by the way. We're winding down in David's kingdom now. So David really doesn't have a lot of fight in him, you could see. All right, we'll pick it up in chapter 21 in the next study. I'll see you then.